Day 2, mid-morning, and once again we are sailing with good wind and making good speeds.
Wind speed on the code 0.
This is what makes us both smile. It's why we do this.
What's the maximum wind speed you can have the sail up with?
Really lovely, lovely, lovely.
A skipper of an 85-foot oyster replied saying that he had his out in 30 knots of wind.
Help me, I need a good advice. Please don't say no, be my hero.
Hopefully all those spider boats had a successful night's fishing. I think they've actually just come up through a cut. There's a little cut through down to the sea there, but it's too shallow for us, so we are departing and we're going out west, and well, it's going to be about 200 miles I think. It depends how we feel when we get out there, but obviously we can duck into any of those islands that run along the Banda and Flores Sea, but we're going to be about, what, 80 miles from land at the closest point I think, so we're just going to go across. So that was the town of Benteng. I have to say, if you are a cruiser and you're in this area, I definitely recommend popping in here because it is beautiful. But you can see there's a couple of more settlements just behind me here. We're going to go through a little cut through here. There's more villages here, but just beautiful scenery, and both Liz and I were saying that that's our kind of anchorage, that is. It's just, you know, completely protected, it's close to town, we had good internet connection to get weather updates, and of course, as you saw, lots of friendly locals. Now, I think I corrected myself twice in saying that this was Sulawesi and then it wasn't Sulawesi, but this is considered part of Sulawesi. So we are now saying goodbye to Sulawesi. Kraken's doing her thing. Obviously we're further out on the other side, so that's why the print doesn't look as striking, because the print's on the outside. That's for all the fishing boats to see. And I say that in jest because since we've been out here I can see one fishing boat on the horizon, and that is literally it. It is a Friday of course, so a lot of the local fishermen will be in today, mosque day and all that. Relatively light winds at the moment. It is going to be variable I think. And in fact, if you look at the chart, and you can see all those islands across the bottom of the Banda and Flores Sea, and you can see how they affect the wind. You get patches of strong wind and then you get light patches, so I presume we're on a light patch at the moment. Just touching 4 knots, occasionally anything between 3 and 4 basically, which means at this rate we're going to get to our next destination in exactly 2 days. Hardly any wind, but what wind there is actually blowing almost southwest, which doesn't make sense. We have a swell coming from the southwest as well. I checked 2 forecasts this morning. The one that we normally use, which has been pretty much spot on the whole time, had 15 to 20 knots. The other one was lighter, so I'm hoping that, I think I said earlier, that we're going to try and get to a point where there's wind, but yeah, so far we've just had to motor for some hours now. There's not even anything to look at either. We've passed 2 fishing boats, seen 1 thing on AIS and 2 flying fish, and that was the highlight of the day. Oh, a bird. We saw a low flying booby, and I did just see a boat on the horizon just there, possibly. Quick motor sailing update. I say motor sailing because we've got the mizzen and the main out. Not much wind though. As you can see by the orange on my face, we have a great sunset coming up. Still motoring though, and I didn't really explain myself earlier, but the reason for my disappointment was because we are in the southeast monsoon, which means prevailing winds, prevailing swell, and the current should all be coming from the southeast. But for the last few hours we've had the current, but the wind and the swell has been coming from the southwest. But I'm happy to say, just as the sun's going down, that we are a little bit more stable, a little bit flatter, and I can just make out one of the islands. There's a whole load of islands, Komodo being one of them, Flores, which are all on our port side, and I can actually see one, and I measured it, it's 75 miles away, so it just shows you how big it is. When you look at it on Google Earth, it's very clearly just a volcano. Nowhere to anchor around it, it's all very deep.
We left Sulawesi this morning. That was a sad moment. Have absolutely loved Sulawesi and desperately want to go back. But we're on our way to Lombok, and it's been a long day. We had some great sailing to begin with, and then the rest of the day has just been motoring. It's been a bit boring. I'm going for a 2-hour kit while Jamie starts the watches at 6 o'clock, and so I thought, oh, I better bring my lines in, and lo and behold, little fish on the end. Haven't got a photo of him, it was all quite quick. He's now in the freezer. Just a small bonito. I was even thinking I might put it back, but the hook had wound round his face and got into his eye, so we needed to kill him very quickly. So that was a nice end to the day. We've got some a meal at least for me. Actually, it's probably enough for 2. And yeah, as we're going into the first evening, the sun's going down and the moon is out. We've got a lovely half moon directly above us, so we'll have a bit of light for the first part of this first night sail. Well, we've got the dawn, always a lovely sight when you've been motoring and sailing through the night. In fact, we are sailing, which is great. We'd started off having to motor, about halfway through decided to put the sails up, even though we're only making between 3.5 to 4 knots. It's so much nicer than having that bloody engine on. Yeah, it was a good night. Quite quiet, not much in the way of other traffic, which is of course what it's all about, which is why we have to have the watches. You just have to keep an eye on if there's any other traffic around, and there really wasn't. It was great. I saw loads of shooting stars. We had a brilliantly bright moon that lit everything up for half of the night. Milky Way, Scorpius, even saw Orion this morning. Anyway, we've just got a little bit of sunshine coming up, and I'm probably doing this in the dark, but wanted to let you all know that it was a first night, good night.
We've been travelling close to 12 hours now, and sadly most of that has been under engine. It's been rather frustrating because I was hoping that this journey was going to be our best sail. However, this morning there's a little bit of wind, which is great, which means that we can get the Kraken out again, and we're back up to 5 knots, which is great. So we've got the mizzen, the main and the Kraken. Don't normally run the main with the Kraken, but it was already up, so it doesn't seem to be stealing too much wind from the Kraken, so yeah, we'll just tick along nicely at the moment. So at this speed, it's another 20 hours to go, but I doubt we'll maintain this speed, so we'll probably be arriving at our next anchorage this time tomorrow.
We spent much of this passage under sail with the Code 0, affectionately named the Kraken. It's a Genoa-like light wind sail hoisted to the top of the mainmast and run on a furler clipped to the bow. We find it especially useful as Esper is rigged with a high-cut Yankee that doesn't perform so well in light winds. The Kraken does. Once hoisted, it's controlled by a single infinity furling line and a single sheet. The sheet is brought back to the cockpit via a block.
You may have seen in the footage that it is extremely long. That's the rest of it tied up to the bar there. Now the reason for this is so you can single hand the furling and unfurling of the sail. If you have to go forward of the mast in order to furl away the Code 0, you still need to be able to hold on to the sheet to stop the clew from flapping about. And that is why it is extra long. In an ideal world, it would be nice to have different blocks set at different positions down the side of the boat, depending on the wind angle on the sail, because of course with the Code 0 you can sail with the wind forward of the beam right down to almost downwind. It's not really a downwind sail, but we have sailed it downwind as well. Regarding wind speed on the Code 0, when I installed this with our rigger Jai in Thailand, I asked him, what's the maximum wind speed you can have the sail up with? And his reply was, anything you feel comfortable with. Since then, up to 12 knots. But today we've had a good 15 knots of wind, maybe even a little bit more actually. I put this question to the Oyster Owners Forum, and a skipper of an 85-foot oyster replied saying that he had his out in 30 knots of wind. So we'd be interested to know from any of you out there who actually have a Code 0, what are your sort of general rules and principles regarding wind speeds? What's the fastest speed you've had it out in? How do you approach increasing wind speeds? Do you furl it away or do you sit it out and wait for it for a bit? I always err on the side of caution and tend to furl away, and then if the wind speeds sort of level out, then I'll put it back out again because it's easy to do. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you on that.
Day 2, mid-morning, and once again we are sailing with good wind and making good speeds. This is what makes us both smile. It's why we do this. Really lovely, lovely, lovely. What do you think? Do you know what the speed of the wind is and the speed of the boat is, all that?
Yeah, so it's anything between 10 and 15 knots of wind, little gusts, might drop down to 8. And then boat speeds of hitting 5.5, occasionally 6, and yeah, it's all good. We're now coming along the top of the island of Sumbaya. That's this one here, and it is the 3rd largest volcano in Indonesia at 2,900 metre elevation, which is pretty high. Second highest, surprisingly, is Lombok. We didn't realise this until today, and that's an elevation of 3,900 metres. So these are pretty significant. As you can see, it's a very hazy afternoon though. And we're still, what, 15 miles away from the coastline, so we can't see much. One thing though, these conditions and the lack of boat, no wind at all. On the one hand, if you're going to motor, then these are the best conditions to do it in. The flip side of that is that it's because of these conditions that we're having to motor. There is no wind at all. It's all blocked by the island of Sumbaya, which is very, very big, relatively speaking. But look at this. There is not one other boat out here at all. Not even a fishing boat. I would have expected to have seen perhaps the odd ferry going past, maybe a container ship coming from Java, who knows. Nothing. There is absolutely nothing here at all. You can normally tell when you're close to civilization because you start to get bars on your phone. No bars at all, even though we're only 15 miles from land. Normally we get good internet out from this kind of distance, but obviously this, when it erupted in the 19th century, has pretty much created new, steep, sheer, unforgiving landscape.
Mount Tambora, on the northern coast of Sumbawa Island, is a stratovolcano, and in 1815 it caused the largest volcanic eruption in recorded history. After smaller eruptions in 1880 and 1967, it remains active today. Increased seismic activity was recorded in 2011, 2012 and 2013.
I think there is some settlements around the corner, but yeah, just it's almost spooky.